And we are recording. Welcome to the All Surface Show, episode number 2. I'm one of two co-hosts here, David E.J. Berger. Usually I'm on the mic for my tennis betting podcast, Match Point number 9 of Tennis Bets Podcast, which Steve, my co-host here, graciously joins every now and then. But here it is he and I talking generally about the sport of tennis. Strap in. We are going to opine about this grand sport. Steve, welcome in.
Thanks. What a beautiful morning here in Melbourne to talk about all things tennis. It's been a big week, and nice to see we've had a reasonably quick turnaround to show number 2 from show number 1. We thought we'd come back for more.
Yes, we shot up the charts. We have almost double-digit subscribers now, which, you know what? We've kind of soft launched this. I'm just happy to get it going. I have no expectations. I just think that doing it, it will grow. If you build it, they will come, is a famous movie quote from an American movie. Are there any famous, that's a baseball movie. Are there any famous cricket movies in Australia, Steve?
Cricket? Not really. None, and certainly none that have made it to the international stage. All the main cricket-based movies over here. Well, it's actually more cricket players from here going over to kind of Bollywood. There's a lot of popularity then in kind of Bollywood movies. Brett Lee is someone who comes to mind, but outside of that, there's not a lot. We struggle to get too much fanfare and recognition for many of our movies down here. But yeah, it's been as you said, it's been a soft launch, and looking forward to kind of continuing to grow things. And look, I think it's just great to have the opportunity to talk just more generally about tennis without having to worry about numbers or anything in that kind of betting space. So looking forward to seeing what episode 2 has in store for us.
Yeah, let's get some reps in here while football sort of dominates here in the States. Also, Steve, maybe we should offline about a cricket movie. That could be another side project we work on. Sounds like there's a need.
And we've both got so much time too. I'm sure we can.
Yes. Fatherhood provides a ton of time for both of us. All right. Well, episode 2 here today, we're going to be talking about the Laver Cup to start us out. That seems to be the big headline of the week. Obviously, there's events going on around the world. We can also talk Billie Jean King Cup, not to take away from that. But we do have Carlitos Alcaraz playing once again. So I think where he goes, the talk of the sport goes, and making headlines on and off the court, the Spaniard, which we'll get into. But let's start with the Laver Cup. It's Laver Cup weekend. A lot of debate, and I have here on our show sheet, do we care? Which I think is a fair question, because it's a tricky thing, because, look, we obviously have some of the best in the world playing with Alcaraz and Taylor Fritz on the American side. That said, I feel like it's an easy thing to hate on and to turn your nose up at. I also feel like the reason it was started was to have another reason to showcase the big three and Andy Murray, and those days are over. I don't know that the intent of Laver Cup was to showcase Jensen Brooksby alternate for the team world. No offense to Brooksby, but
yes, say poor Jensen Brooksby's copying strays. I can hand on heart say that I think I've only watched one full Laver Cup match over the years, and that was a certain doubles farewell for Roger Federer. I don't think. Look, ultimately for me, so particularly watching tennis through Europe and the US, as an Australian, you need to have an element of dedication to it, given the time that it's going to be played. And then, if you're wanting to watch it delayed, trying to, avoid spoilers and avoid everything that kind of comes with that as well. But for me, I feel like Laver Cup is just trying to kind of hit that kind of sweet spot of maybe the more casual tennis lovers who are in the area in which the tournament or the weekend is played. I just, for me personally, as someone who very heavily follows tennis, for me this just screams, particularly this weekend, I'm more interested in what's going on in China for both of the men's tournaments. I'm more interested in what's going on in Korea for the women's. And I just feel like, it's trying to detract away from, as you said, we were talking about this, the Billie Jean King Cup, this week and this weekend. Why are we trying to kind of pull all the attention away from it to, what is effectively an exhibition full of players who, are, not particularly happy with how long a tennis season may be. We can get into that in a little bit more detail shortly. But for me, I just see it more so like my first instinct when I look at that group of players there, I go, well, what a great opportunity in China for players, who aren't at the Laver Cup to be able to generate some decent ranking points and try and move their way up the rankings. So yeah, I think it's trying to find that kind of little sweet spot, in the middle. Obviously, there's a lot of money behind it. As you said, there were some big names initially, drawn to it, but it feels a little bit like an afterthought and shouldn't be commanding the attention it is, particularly with everything else that's going on in the tennis world this week.
I will say a few things, and I'm going to roll in some of the stuff you mentioned into what I'm about to say to tee us up to talk about that schedule complaint, because the Laver Cup this weekend will take place at the Chase Center in San Francisco, where the Golden State Warriors play and where the Golden State Valkyries, the women's team, blew a 17-point lead this week to lose to the Minnesota Lynx, and their season is over now. Great job. So we're in San Francisco. You have a player from your home country, Alex de Minaur, who's coming back from Sydney after already traveling from New York to Sydney. So he's traveling Sydney to San Francisco, and he gets an appearance fee, but the six players who are on the winning team, they only get $250,000. Now, I'm not scoffing at $250,000. However, a player of Alex de Minaur's caliber, plenty of opportunity to make $250,000. And he obviously was on record about the schedule length. And from here, he will be flying to Asia. So I know you have some opinions about this, and I'll toss it to you.
Yeah, I think if you're going to sit there and use the schedule as an excuse for a loss to Alexander Bublik at Roland Garros, about how heavy the schedule is, how things need to be reduced, and everything that comes with that, I don't think you can then in September go from the US Open to Sydney to play Davis Cup, where there's no ranking points on the line and it doesn't, there's nothing tied to that specifically, to then fly to the United States to play Laver Cup, where there is again no ranking points on offer and it is just money, to then fly back to China to then play an ATP tournament where there are points on the line. If he loses early in Beijing, you'd want to be pretty careful about, I think, the comments that he makes post-match around fatigue and the schedule. And he's not the only one at the Laver Cup who's made comments over the last 12 to 18 months around schedules. Carlos Alcaraz, has made comments. I think he made some comments when he lost to Van der Zandschulp at the US Open last year around how heavy and tricky the schedule is, not having as many days off as he'd like. I think Alex Zverev's made some comments in the past as well. Taylor Fritz is another one. So you need to be, it's one of those, can you have your cake and eat it too kind of things of, well, yeah, you can say all these things, but you're also collecting the money that comes with these appearance fees and exhibitions and these things that you don't need to do. They're not mandatory. But if you're finding that it is making the mandatory parts of the role of top 10 tennis player difficult, well, then maybe you need to reconsider how that all ties in, or just the optics of it. I think it just doesn't feel like a good look for someone sitting at home. And for me, as someone who watches tennis year round, I don't want to sit there and watch top players go, we need less tennis. Like, you think about everyone who's ranked below, that 100 through 300, who are looking for any opportunity under the sun to be able to kind of come out and improve their ranking and get to a point where they can, contemplate having a heavy schedule. It just feels like there's a massive disconnect at the top of the game, and they see the money and they go, okay, well, yeah, of course I'm going to take the $250,000 potentially at the Laver Cup. But maybe they need to take a step back and go, well, yeah, what's that going to do to my chances in Beijing at earning significant ranking points? It feels like the mark's been missed a little bit.
You've mentioned some players that are here. I'll go over the teams for Team World here. De Minaur is on Team World, along with Taylor Fritz, Francisco Cerundolo, who, is a guy that actually could use a spark. I actually don't blame him for playing this event. Alex Mickelson, João Fonseca. Fonseca got to be Federer, and I want to use that to talk about the fact that the one kind of note in the history of Laver Cup is it is the last time we saw Nadal and Federer play each other. And I remember I was actually at the San Diego 250 back when they had that on the men's calendar, and everyone was in it wasn't really a clubhouse, but in the area with the TV watching that while action was going on live outside. Might have been a bigger crowd inside than outside. So that is one little nugget of history or lore the Laver Cup can hang their hat on as an event. So you have to consider that. Opelka is also here. And then I mentioned Brooksby's the alternate. Andre Agassi, I want to say too. Agassi coming out of the woodwork to be an elder statesman of the game. Kind of, long overdue in a way. I also feel like his son is older now. So maybe that's part of the reason he's coming into the limelight more, the spotlight more. As opposed to his American rival, Pete Sampras, who was walking the earth, apparently. And then Team Europe is Alcaraz, as you mentioned, Alex Zverev, Holger Rune, another guy. Man, he could use a spark. Casper Ruud. There are some guys here that could actually use this to propel them a bit. Ruud, Menchik, Cobley actually is someone who's had a pretty good year. And Tomas Mahach. Do they give out points for retirements at this event? I have to check the rules on that, because if so, that's might get them over 13 with Team Europe here.
Look, I saw Casper Ruud's already had a good week. He played golf with Federer, so there's everyone has their different motivations and intentions for the week. It's yeah. So are you, so as someone in the States, this is nearby, do you see yourself tuning in heavily to it over the next couple of days?
I mean, I'll act like I'm too cool for it, but I will watch some of it. Yeah, I won't be watching it like hanging on every point at the edge of my couch. But I, especially as it's in my time zone too, so it's nice and TV friendly for me.
Yeah, and I just want to say, if you've got this big tournament, you've got all these players playing, just they could have started with a better match than Ruud versus Opelka. Couldn't they? Like, are they soft launching the weekend as well, or are they?
It's a good point. At least get Fonseca out there.
Yeah.
get some buzz going. So I mentioned Fonseca meeting Federer. You mentioned the golf with Federer. There's a lot of media moments throughout the week. The strangest one to me, and I'm going to see if I can tech lord this up here. The strangest one to me is the odd photos they take, which is, I mean, they look like groomsmen. Oh man, I'm struggling here. I can't find it.
They should get ranking points just for tolerating the media requests that they have to do for the week. Surely there's
I got to get my
the
StreamYard
stuff that they would come
game
with.
up.
We can have a look. Otherwise, if we can't get it up, we can pop it up.
I got it. I think I got it.
Here we go.
Can you see it?
This is killing me. Yeah, that's it's just.
I mean, what is
What
this?
are we doing?
It looks like they're the wedding of Yannick Noah and Rod Laver. It's a beautiful photo, but I don't get that part of the tradition of this myself.
I just look at that photo and I just think of like the poor like media handlers and the people trying to logistically bring that all together and go, okay, everyone, make sure you've got your suits, make sure you've got everything ready to go. We've all got to be next to the bridge at 11 a.m. Let's all gather around Rod and the cup.
Yeah, well, it's giving me PTS flashbacks to when I was a groomsman, especially with a wedding with a lot of guys. And I mean, we're doing the Abbey Road. We're doing like stuff with the basketball. It's just such an uncool vibe for an event that's supposed to have prestige. I don't really get it. And they do the similar thing. They're like at the Giants game with Giants jerseys, and and then like they did the classic. Let's take Alcaraz to Alcatraz, which is hilarious to me. Speaking of Alcaraz, so obviously the big off the court headline is this Brooks Nader and whether or not she's dating both Carlitos and Yannick Sinner. She was on Andy Cohen's Watch What Happens Live last night. They straight up asked her about it, and she was like, I don't kiss and tell, especially to the other guy. She did nothing to squash the rumors. In fact, I would say she threw gasoline all over the rumors, the flames of the rumors. So we're going to be living with that storyline for a while. And also, I will be honest, I was not familiar with Brooks Nader's work.
Well, and that's the thing. Why would you squash any of the rumors when you're getting that much attention? What's the benefit?
No, I would not. And big shout out to Brooke, and big shout out to her sister as well. Lovely additions to the research this week. Speaking of, so we have one more. Well, let's go to the other cup, Billie Jean King Cup. Did you have any major takeaways from that so far, Steve?
I think it just feels, as I was saying, it just feels like it's somewhat lost in the week a little bit, the whole cup and where we're at. So, at the time of us recording, we've had the quarterfinals. So, Italy defeated China 2-0. Ukraine defeated Spain 2-0. The US won in a doubles third tie playoff, and Great Britain defeated Japan 2-0. So we haven't really had any fireworks of any way, shape, or form really to kick things off. Probably the biggest news was Taylor Townsend having to apologise off court for some comments she made around the buffet. I think it was at the accommodation. But I think that the appeal probably then looking to today is, you assume that the US will probably get through against Great Britain. but it's the Italy versus Ukraine, which is going to be the interesting matchup here. I think looking to the semi-finals. So it'll be interesting to see Svitolina and Kostyuk can come through the singles in that particular matchup, or if we're going to end up in a doubles playoff, I guess, of sorts for the final. But yeah, the Americans obviously made things a little bit tricky with Rybakina beating Pegula, I think it was yesterday, to be able to tie things up. But yeah, you'd think it's the Americans to lose at this point, looking at the state of the final four teams.
I watched a little of Navarro last night, fend off a couple match points, stayed cool, collected, came through in the breaker. She had some opportunities in the last game on return before the breaker to maybe win outright, but then had to navigate through a pretty tricky breaker. I thought a lot of there wasn't a ton of power happening in that match, so had to keep the ball in was key. seemed to be the way forward for both players was. Go ahead.
A highly underrated tactic, keeping the ball in.
I have to say yes, it actually is, especially in that match when no one was hitting winners. Taylor Townsend, she discovered that her profile raised pretty quickly. Yep. Although, I mean, ignorant comments can go viral for pretty much anybody, but I do think the fact that she's suddenly in the spotlight did not help her whatsoever with that. So what do we have left here for Billie Jean King?
So we've got the semi-finals. So the United Kingdom will be taking on the US. So yeah, it's when you look at it, the strength with these kind of the nations that have two effectively top flight singles players, it's going to be a massive advantage because you almost then don't even need to worry about the doubles to an extent if you can just look after the singles. So they'll be playing. So you'd say, as an example, it's Cartel and Bolter against Pegula and Navarro. So you potentially see maybe that Emma Navarro did struggle a little bit against Putintseva, that you could maybe make a case there that she might be able to be a little bit vulnerable. I think Pegula's probably got most people left in this draw in terms of across the four teams covered. And then you go to we've got Italy and Ukraine, so it'll be Svitolina and Kostyuk as the key singles players against Paolini and Cocciarello. So I think it's actually we can say that Cocciarello had arguably one of the comebacks of, I don't know if you want to say Billie Jean King Cup history, but comebacks of the week. She was down to one. She was down 4-6, 2-5, and then reeled off 5 games in a row to force a decider. And then she thought, you know what? I was down a break in the second set. Let's try being a double breakdown in the third set. And came from love 4 down and 2-5 down, and then again reeled off 5 games in a row to come back and win and help push Italy through to the semi-final. So a big comeback there, but certainly a tougher contest, I think, on offer here today as they take on Ukraine.
It should be a fun event. I do feel like Billie Jean King Cup, even more than Davis Cup, has a little bit more juice to it. But speaking of Davis Cup, I want to talk about my match of the week. The best match I saw since we recorded last week. I think we can make this a weekly segment. And that was in the Davis Cup in your home country with Rafael Colleon defeating Alex de Minaur in the Davis Cup, a stunning 3-setter. I think it had everything you want in a great match because it had great quality and great drama with the Belgian coming out in 3. I thought the quality of the first set was very high. Colion's a guy I believe in as a player, and I won't say he's necessarily let me down so far on the betting podcast, but I will say I have backed him in spots where he's not come through. And I think maybe I was just a little early on him, as he obviously had a pretty good U.S. Open. I think he got a little bit unlucky at the Winston-Salem tournament before. He was having some issues with double faults, which he seemed to course corrected. He's not been a double fault machine in his last few matches. And then obviously in the third, the cramps. I mean, it looked like who was that? He was going full ray gun. Let's keep the Australian theme going on. Looks like he was busting out some ray gun breakdance moves with his cramps. And he still came out on top. And he made the decision to. This is why I say the drama too, because afterwards he said he was about to quit, and then was like, "No, I'm fighting," and circling back to our Demon topic, not a great look for him to lose that one.
Literally, Rafael climbed off the canvas, and I do love that. It's obviously unfortunate when you see that happen, but from a tennis spectacle side of things, you think back over the years, the amount of opportunities and times and situations where you have a player who, that you see that at the other end of the court. So de Minaur sees that start of the third set, and then it becomes that much more difficult for them to close things off. At the end of the day, to be able to kind of finish off the match and finish off an injured opponent. I'm thinking of Medvedev against Tsitsipas earlier in the year, where he tore his hamstring and was still able to get the job done over Tsitsipas. I think it adds an extra wrinkle to these kind of matches and situations late. And de Minaur had 26 break point opportunities across the course of the match and could only convert 5. If you look at de Minaur, if he wins 2/3 of an opponent's second serves across the course of a 3-set match, you're thinking he's probably going to go a fair way to winning. But it's about the points it's not just about the number of points you win, but it's when you win them as well. And Belgium did a terrific job of that across the course of the tie, including that fifth tie. So great to see. Obviously he did cramp, still got the win, and then backed it up the next day, and then beat Vukic as well in the fifth tie or fifth rubber to be able to claim the tie and send them off to Italy later in the year for more non-ATP ranking points tennis.
For pride of country, Steve. Before I thought you were talking about people knowing the event. What were you saying about if you walked out the door?
Yeah, look, it's a tricky one. This time of year in Australia, there's a lot of other sport that's kind of reaching its conclusion. We've got the AFL and NRL, so the football and the rugby. It just wasn't very well advertised here in any way, shape, or form, and I think that's probably lucky. I think for me, again, as someone who watches year round, the question mark I had at one point was probably the way that the Australians kind of tweaked their team after going 2-0 down. It just feels like every time there's a bit of adversity in terms of being down in the tie count, Leighton Hewitt just completely avoids playing doubles specialists in doubles. We saw it at the start of the year in the United Cup. I think it was the Great Britain and Australia were playing, and they needed to win fairly well in their doubles tie to be able to progress. And they took Alan Perez and Matt Ebden out and put de Minaur and Gadecki in, and they got just utterly destroyed and got nowhere near what they needed to do. And the same thing here again with John Peers was slated to play. I just thought maybe if Peers were to play that doubles and they did get through that doubles, that it might have allowed Jordan Thompson to play the fifth tie or the fifth rubber, against Collignon, and probably was a bit of a better matchup from an Australian perspective. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see how things go forward, particularly for Aussies, the Australians. And I think, the US teams had this a little bit in the past, and, there's probably that recognition factor that comes with just being a doubles specialist. But I'm curious to see how many doubles players put their hands up for these kind of tournaments when, when the going gets tough. They find themselves sitting on the bench watching singles players, do what they can do pretty well themselves in terms of playing doubles.
I question if Jordan Thompson comes through for you guys. Had that materialized, seems to be going through it a bit. Tough loss to Bergs. It was a breaker and one break. But then, yeah, I was a little shocked by how easily Tabilo got through in China, in Chengdu. We'll see what happens. Jordan Thompson was third favorite for that tournament, and he's out round one.
And again, it probably comes back to, if he didn't play Davis Cup, is he in better position to be able to make the most of a draw that's doesn't have anyone who's playing Laver Cup? So that's a big opportunity missed for Jordan as well, looking to ATP points in a season that's been interrupted with injury and form confidence issues. So it'll all start to click and come back for him at some point. It's just a matter of where, and probably going from a full weekend in Sydney to then travel back to China to play that tournament probably wasn't ideal preparation compared to someone who played a challenger tournament nearby last week and developed some really good form by making the final.
Well, before we round to our last segment, let's talk about some things we've seen this week in those tournaments in China, and you can talk some WTA as well in Seoul. I think the big thing for me that I've seen on the ATP side was Matteo Berrettini just getting shown the door, Grandpa Simpson style, walking in, walking out by Dalibor Sverchina, who I speak your name. I love Dalibor, but and he's in form. I will say that as well. He's definitely not in the dumps as a player at the moment. That said, this is a player that Matteo Berrettini should be handling with ease, or at least not getting broken so easily in these conditions. So I have some big time concerns here on Berrettini in terms of his ability to get back to, I don't even know, a top 20 player. I think this guy's days on the tour could be numbered thanks to injury.
Yeah, and look, there's a little bit of a revolving door for, you can probably put Berrettini, Seb Korda kind of on the carousel of will come back, play some really good top level tennis, get injured, be away for a period of time, have to work their way back to that kind of top level, and then potentially another injury. I thought with Berrettini that he'd maybe taken at least enough time off. You never want to see those players kind of come back early and rush their way back and come back clearly injured. And I thought Berrettini had done a good job of at least taking the time required. But yeah, I guess you can certainly say there's room for improvement in terms of his level, and hopefully, to his, it may be to his advantage that you're saying you've got all these top players who have had a very busy season, that they've been available to play the whole year, which means they've played a lot of tennis. That Berrettini might be able to build a bit of confidence over the latter end of the year, but maybe it would have been a benefit for him to come a week earlier and try and make his way through a challenger tournament, or try and build a little bit of form and confidence instead of trying to kind of step in straight into an ATP tournament and need to be at your best. Because I think that's the thing, if we're seeing probably that floor or the bottom or the qualifiers even coming through a lot of these tournaments now, there's not a lot of easy outs early in early in these ATP tournaments, there's a lot of players pushing and trying to make their way up into the top 100, top 50, top 32 when we're thinking about seeding towards the Australian Open. It's that's why I like these kind of weeks. You're going to see that mix. We certainly saw that with Matteo losing first up.
To a lucky loser, no less. And I did I say it was Chengdu? It was in Hangzhou that happened. Look, he has good wins this year. He's beat Demon. He's beat Zverev. He was competitive against Tsitsipas, who's whatever at this point in Dubai. It's just look at his last few years. He's 13-11 on the main tour this year. He won 32 matches in 2024, which matched his total in 2022. But his Wimbledon final year, he won 42 matches. I just don't know that we'll ever see that guy again. He's turning 30 in April.
I think it's that thing of, he is probably the type of player that needs to limit his schedule across the course of the year, because it is that kind of build up of, that playing, a Grand Slam, and then, or I guess as an example, if you were to play and make it to the semi-final or final of Indian Wells and then back up and try and play Miami straight after, it's those little patches of the draw of the season where, fatigue can build. And, I think we've shown, he's had a lot of abdominal injuries and other issues that, he is such a power player, but he does, ride a very, very fine line between, redlining and getting hurt. It wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if we're here talking in July next year and he's, late in the second week of Wimbledon. But maybe it just needs to figure out a way to kind of manage his body, or there's something that maybe needs to change with an element of his game to be able to help him be a bit more durable across the course of a season.
What's not going to help him is, there's a fresh crop of young guns coming onto the scene. I mean, if you're listening to the Sverchinas of the world, I've got some bad news. There's some players who played the main tour who are a lot better that you're going to be facing in earlier rounds coming up. The other thing I wanted to talk about in terms of the men in China is what are we making of Basavreddy and Nishesh Basavreddy? He's taking on Daniil Medvedev coming up. If Medvedev loses that match, another guy I think you can hit the panic button on pretty hard. And I honestly think Nishesh is pretty live in that match, because the thing of it is, like, it's not even that. No, it's two things. Medvedev can't outlast people in rallies, which is like just plays into Nishesh's hands. And then he's pretty underpowered at this point too, which is like how Nishesh loses a lot. Dudes are just blowing him off the court a bit. That's why Zverev can cash an underbet against him. I think that's a really interesting match on the horizon.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, you said, if Medvedev loses this, do we hit the panic button? I think the panic button's been hit. Like, I think that's well and truly been hit over the last little period of time. Coaching change for Medvedev. I think it's a Thomas Johansson now, in a little bit of a trial period with Medvedev. So I think it's one of the more fascinating ones. And, Medvedev's probably the interesting one to watch through the back end of this year, leading into Australia. Are we going to see a significant change in game style from him? Is there going to be a little bit more aggression in rallies? Is he going to change his positioning? What are we going to see from this change? Is it just that, we will see a refreshed player with new, just enjoying hearing new perspectives and new thoughts, because his previous relationship and setup was very well established and maintained for a very long period of time, but it did feel like it had run its course. They had squeezed as much juice out of the lemon as they could, and now it's time to try something new with new opinions. So I'm really interested to see how he goes here. It does feel a little bit like it's going to go either really, really well or really, really poorly, and there may not be too much middle ground, I think, between the two. But that's probably the match that I'm most fascinated about when you're looking at the next 24, 48 hours of tennis coming out of China.
Agreed. Anything on the WTA side that's caught your attention?
Yeah, it's obviously a little bit quieter with just the one main WTA tournament this week, and there was a bit of rain earlier in the week, but they've managed to get to the quarterfinals. Hasn't been the case. I think was it Hangzhou was that rained out yesterday? There's going to be a kind of busy end to the week there. But Seoul, we've got the 8 players left, and it's a really interesting mix of top players and players that have kind of made some breakthroughs this year. So we have Clara Towson and Maya Joint, which I think is probably the match of the day. A little bit biased as an Australian, that Joint's done a terrific job of coming from well outside the top 100 to be in the top 50 now, with a lot of room to continue to grow. In terms of her game, particularly as a 19-year-old, her ability has been really impressive against Towson, who's also put together a phenomenal season, now ranked 12 in the world. So that's the first match from Seoul.
Towson has been great.
Yeah, she really has. And then you've got Iga against Krejcikova. It's one of those ones of like the not the old guard, but it's the more experienced players that you're kind of used to expecting to see, in the back end of these tournaments. It's great to see Iga here playing the tournament. I think that's a great get for Seoul in particular. And then Ala Seidel against Alexandrova should be a really fascinating match. I think the last quarterfinal on court. Seidel's really fought back from a couple of losing positions, came from 2-5. I think she saved a match point against Haddad Meyer at 2-5 in the third set yesterday. The Brazilian, another one who's probably had a tricky schedule. I was looking at the flights. She was in Brazil last week and had to get to Korea, and it's not a straightforward flight situation there. And it looks like it may be caught up with the Brazilian there, struggling with a knee issue late. But Seidel was able to go from 2-5 match point down to win that 1-7-5. So another opportunity here, as you said, you've got that mixture of, you've got Iga and the likes at the top of the range, and you've got Seidel, who's come through qualifying and has been outside the top 100, trying to make her way back in, who's won 4 consecutive 3-setters, including 2 in qualifying. So a couple of really interesting storylines, but Joint and Seidel are probably the two that have captured my eye the most, and I'm interested to see where they go, not only this week, but moving forward towards the back end of the season.
It does feel like Maya Joint is going to be a player on the tour. All right, Steve. I like your question here to round us out. As we look towards the Australian Open, the next major, which I think, a lot of the players too are looking towards as well, not just in terms of trying to find form to round out the year, but managing their bodies ahead of the start of the season. There's still plenty of calendar left, but for the most part, the season is over for some players in terms of how hard they're going to go. That said, I think this is a list of dudes who should be going very hard for your question, which is here are the players ranked 33 to 50 in the live rankings, who from this list will be a seed at the Australian Open. And I think that every one of these players should be gunning for that because I'll go through the first 10. Cam Norrie, Brandon Nakashima, Gabriel Diallo, Gio Pecci Pericard, Alex Muller, Corentin Moutet, Alexei Poprin, Jama Munar. Already from that list, I think we can toss out Cam Norrie, who just
Well,
lost.
yeah, well, Cam's an interesting one because then you look at his, he's ranked around, as I said, it's that 33, and he's also around that in that kind of race for this year. So, he's not having to defend, excess points in the back end of the season, but not an ideal start to the Asian hardcourt swing for Cam the other day is probably the best way to put it. And probably stings having had match point as well.
Brandon Nakashima, we talked about him on the betting podcast as he's taking on the current champion of the tournament they're in, Jerry Shung. And Nakashima, who, for all intents and purposes, has had a great 2025. I mean, leaps and bounds better than, even last year, and especially 2023, when she was just abysmal. But, this is a guy that's making deep runs at major events and then just losing to a better player. But of late, he's struggling to hold serve. I mean, he's going deep with De Jong, like he's barely beating blocks. So I'm interested to see if he can trend back up or if those issues are going to linger moving forward.
Yeah, that's the thing, and that's why looking at this list, it becomes a really fascinating, is at a time, not only for there's the two parts to it. There's the players here. It's a massive opportunity to be seeded at a Grand Slam, and just know that you can walk in on the day of the draw and know that you're not going to end up having your name sitting next to Yannick Sinner until at least the third round. Like there is scope there, and to know that you're going to be facing other unseeded players, through those first couple of potential rounds. I look, obviously, personally with that little patch there of a pocket of players, Fonseca is probably one that, generally leaps out. Obviously, probably would be, he doesn't have many points to defend across the back end of the year. But again, probably would have preferred to see him try and get a couple of hundred ranking points in China this week, but he's overplaying Laver Cup. It's one of those ones that's going to get that balance. And that's by full credit to, Cam Norrie did lose, but, it's good to see him out there trying to kind of establish and move his way back into that top 30, top 32. But yeah, I feel like this is probably the more competitive little period for, being able to make your way through. Can you get into that top 32 spot? Are we going to see a couple of late challenger appearances from some players in this little section to try and get themselves over the line into a seeding spot? And outside the top 50, there's Gao Monfils, there's Tien, there's Berrettini, Manarino, Opelka, Medvedev, Seb Korda. They're all even outside the top 50 at the moment. And you look at those names and you go, yeah, it would be great to be seeded, but also there's going to be a lot of unseeded floaters who are going to potentially cause a bit of havoc come the third week in January.
Yeah, these are the live rankings. Ben Bonzi is a name that I think is interesting if his body can hold up. Obviously, it's a pretty big if, but we saw him building a lot of form, and we're staying in conditions that should suit him. And especially if he plays not just the Asian swing, but the indoor swing as well. So plenty of opportunity for him.
And that's the thing I think for him is he's going to have a pretty big late in season because he is defending a fair chunk of points from late last year. But I'm interested to see, I think we've seen probably more consistency with him over the last couple of months. I'm interested to kind of put a bookmark to kind of come back to talk about him kind of middle of next year. If he's been able to establish, that level, across a full season, I think he is someone who's going to be knocking on the door of consistent Grand Slam seeding and being a player who is capable of causing an upset or two in favourable conditions against some of the really top players.
Diallo, the Canadian, is a guy that, I mean, should really take advantage of this portion of the calendar as well. I think most sites up until March of next year should suit his game. Obviously, he's probably not going to the Golden Swing, but a lot of ground for him to make up, not make up, but to gain some points as well.
Absolutely, and there are a lot of players here who do. You do have a bit of a mix, but he's obviously got a very high ceiling with his.
Like he seems level. Like he's on the crest of being like a seeded type of guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think you look back through, basically you go back to, he won on grass in the Netherlands. I think he won one of the titles there, and you go since then. 2 wins in Mallorca, 1 win at Wimbledon, 1 win at Washington, 1 win in Toronto, 1 win in Cincinnati, 1 win via walkover at Winston-Salem, 1 win at the US Open. So it's about kind of turning those 1 wins into 2 and 2 into 3 consistently. Whereas at the moment he's kind of going title and then a whole bunch of second rounds. So it's trying to find that balance, I think, and consistency for him week to week. And I think it will come. But, I think back, and particularly this is probably another case in point of the importance of being seeded at these kind of tournaments. Through that run, he's lost to Fritz at Wimbledon. He's lost to Shelton at Washington. It was Fritz again in Toronto. It was Sinner in Cincinnati. And I think he had a set point on serve in the second set. So that he's running into pretty good players very early in these draws, which is going to make it hard for him to make a push up. So being able to, build some ranking points, become seeded, and avoid the likes of Jannik Sinner early in a draw, I think is going to go a long way to helping him continue to rise.
Consistency, I think, is the big issue for a lot of these guys who have a surface advantage here over like a Karabahi or a Baez, who are going to struggle for some time till we get back on the dirt. But Alex Mueller, who has been better on hard courts, Mute, Alexei Poprin to win 1,000 and then do nothing forever. Jama Munar will look great, and then he'll be like, this is why I'm hot and this is why I'm not. Sonego, he can go on long losing streaks. Zizou Bergs is a definition of a mixed bag. And Mio Kuzmanovic could, beat Tommy Paul in the 4th round of the AO and then lose in the 1st round of the U.S. Open to JPV. So, and then I'm just going to toss out Giron and Altmaier. I don't think they're going to do anything, to be honest.
It's going to take a bit of a turnaround, I think, this time of year. Particularly Altmaier got injured, I think, wasn't it, against Demon Or of the US Open. And yeah, Giron's been...
One last name to talk about. You have here. What if Lerner Teen puts it together and goes on an absolute heater to end the season?
I think it's out. I think it's a possibility.
I do too.
Yeah, it's that being said, he did struggle against Navoni the other day.
But here's the thing about Navoni, because I typically fade him. Navoni is actually good for like a large swath of a match, but you just can't stay that level. Because I always talk about it on the betting podcast, slap and pray is his style.
Yeah.
And his prayers get answered a lot.
Yeah.
And that's how we got through that first set. And it's just, he can get breaks, but he can't hold serve. So I think it's a tricky player to comp, because I don't think that Navoni obviously is not a great player, especially on a quick hard court. That said, I do think he is someone that just gets by asking a ton of questions, and could be a bad matchup for someone like Teen who's trying to do the same thing. But I just a grinding type hardcore who is someone that has historically been a tough out in his young career so far at every level he's played. It would not shock me to see him go on a run.
Yeah, I think a big opportunity for Teen. So he gets Zeppieri in the second round this week for an opportunity you would likely expect to be against Andrei Rublev in a quarterfinal, who I think the two of them they've played a couple of, they split?
They've traded wins, yeah.
Yeah. So I think, it's, again, these are the opportunities that you need to take to be able to kind of make that push and start to, consistently, sit in, as you said, that, you can find yourself in a spot in a draw where you can, he's the 7th seed here, so it's been great for him to be able to get a couple of matches before he faces a Rublev. Now it's about being able to match it with someone like Andre, and I think that the potential certainly there. It's probably going to depend a bit on which Andre turns up if that meeting does go ahead. Who can win the third and final clash between the two of the last month or so.
Yeah, kind of wild that I feel like it's always so crazy when players play each other like a bunch of times, especially like in a small time span, and then there'll be players like RBA and Manarino I think have never played or something like that.
Yeah. It's just, they've managed to just do this dance around each other in draws for 15 years and just never come across each other. It's it's, I do like it for these type of ones because it is, it feels like it's a bit of a measuring stick for Teen as well. Like it's, it is a feel like someone who's been established versus someone, trying to kind of break their way through. What I like generally with these kind of matchups is the second and third matchup when you go, okay, so like they've thrown their best at the other person in the first matchup. What are we looking at? What's changed? Are there any tactic changes that we see, from match to match? So I'm curious to see if they do meet again, if we see anything different to what we've seen over the last couple of meetings.
Sorry, they have played RBA and Manarino. They played 4 times, but they have not played since 2017. So that's why I pulled them out.
2017 was a long time ago. That's again, you think about both of them through their peak. Even 2017 through 2020. Like surely you run into each other on a grass court somewhere or
It's bizarre. All right, Steve. Well, I feel like we've had a great episode number 2 here. We will be keeping it going. I thought we covered a lot of ground, a lot of stuff. I added in a screen share that stumbled my way through that, but we'll be doing more of that moving forward. Until next time, everybody, any last words, Steve?
No, just have a great week, and we'll do this all again next time. Thanks for those who've tuned in to the first episode. This episode provided some feedback. We'll hopefully continue to learn and grow.
Yes, and I guess what you're supposed to do is ask for comments. Tell us any player you think might be seeded. Give us your opinion on Laver Cup, any of the stuff we've talked about. Feel free to comment below. Subscribe to the channel as well. Go ahead.
Let's set a tentative goal for 10 subscribers by the next.
Let's hit double digits.
Double figures. Yeah. Let's do it.
Don't forget to ring that bell. That's my favorite, as my kids' favorite YouTube says. All right. Until next time, everybody. See you on the court.